Anthony, just before the break, we were with Sergio Romano, who was saying how, well, this kind of thing, having the far right in your coalition has become normalized. Certain types of rhetoric have become normalized. What you just heard, is that closer to something that France's former president Nicolas Sarkozy would say, or that the current head of the French far right, Marine Le Pen, would say?
It's exactly what the leader of the far-right party in Austria has accused Sebastian Kurz of doing. He said to him, "You've stolen our ideas." He said to him, "You have, in the run-up to the election, you stole our ideas, you cracked down on migration, you've expropriated, as it were, the notion of being tough on security, being tough on migrants." That's something that the far right says they've been saying all along, and their claim was, at least in the run-up to this election, that has now resulted in this coalition agreement between Sebastian Kurz's party and the far right said to Sebastian Kurz, "You were just taking ideas that we had all along. We've been saying it all along. We've been saying that migration, illegal migration, in the words of both parties, is a danger to Austria. It's a danger to Austria's identity. It's a security threat. They say that there's the risk of radical Islam infiltrating Austria." And the far right says that Sebastian Kurz is, in essence, a sort of a puppet of themselves, of the same party.
So does Kurz himself speak with conviction when he talks about Germanic culture, about scaling back certain rights for immigrants who don't adapt that Germanic culture?
He is more careful than the far right. The way he talks about these things is much more careful. He is not one to really say things with a rhetorical flourish that might firmly position him in the camp of the far right. He's more of a type of a person who's going to take these themes, use them to whip up support among the user base, whip up support among supporters, whip up support among supporters of the far right. And of course, the far right says that's why he did so well, you know, that he took supporters from the far right by taking that theme. But where he's careful is to differentiate himself between his rhetoric and that of the far right. Certainly in terms of, if we look at the far right going back for a couple of years or so, we see that the far right has been quite harsh. If we go and look back at press conferences, if we go and look back at sort of party events, we see examples of the far right being quite populist and really harsh with the rhetoric. That's something that Sebastian Kurz has been careful to avoid. And of course, going up to the election and even now, I mean, he's in Brussels right now. He's talking to the President of the European Commission. He's talking to the President of the European Council. He's very keen to stress that Austria, in his words, remains pro-European. But of course, one must ask the question, what exactly does that mean? What does pro-European mean? If Sebastian Kurz is so highly critical of the European Union, if he's so critical of the fact that, in his words, it hasn't been able to secure its external borders, if he's so critical about that, if that's something that he shares with the far right, then how pro-European is he? And presumably that's something that member states are going to be looking at. It's something that the President of the European Commission is going to be looking at. They're very careful. They're rather muted in their response. They're saying, well, they look forward to working with Sebastian Kurz, but below the surface, there is going to be this sense that this is a man, this is a coalition government that is going to have to be watched very closely.